It's no secret that the Warhammer 40K universe is absolutely chock full of terrifying aliens, monsters, and eldritch abominations of all shapes and forms. The problem is that since the franchise is so massive, most of the time the spotlight gets dominated by a small handful of major factions and characters, so a lot of the really interesting and obscure stuff tends to go undocumented. You gotta remember that the Imperium of Mankind controls 1,000,000 worlds, each with their own folklore, legends, and cryptid-like creatures that terrorize their populations. In this video series, we're going to be shedding a light on the dark corners of the grimdark universe of Warhammer 40K in order to learn all there is to know about some spooky cryptids from across the cosmos. We're going to be talking about an unknown entity that has the population of a hive world so freaked out that they've turned to ritualistic sacrifice in order to keep it appeased. A malign entity that lurks within the jungles of a backwater death world and is famous for taking the skins of any that wander into its feeding grounds. We're also going to be talking about an infamous monster from the legends of old Earth that the lore of 40K tells us is actually real, but everything that we think we know about them is fundamentally wrong. After reading through a whole bunch of creepy and obscure 40K lore for this video, on one hand I'm super impressed by the skills of all of the writers that contribute to this universe, but on the other hand I feel like they would all definitely benefit from some therapy. Therapy that they can get with the help of today's sponsor, BetterHelp. It seems like every year that goes by, living in our modern world gets more and more stressful each and every day. And unfortunately, a lot of us end up neglecting to take care of our mental health. And sure, most of us have considered therapy, but more often than not, we never follow through on making that appointment. There's no shame in it. Realizing that we need help and reaching out can be really tough. But thankfully, there's BetterHelp, the sponsor of this video, who makes something as serious as taking care of our mental health more accessible, convenient, and most importantly, affordable. They have a massive network of over 30,000 licensed therapists that are trained to listen and give helpful, unbiased advice. So no matter what you're going through, there's someone out there that's perfectly suited to your needs. And BetterHelp is super convenient. Not only can you schedule therapy sessions whenever you want, at a time that's most convenient for you, but if after a session or two you feel like your therapist just isn't the right fit for you, you can switch to a new one at no additional cost, without stressing about insurance or who's in your network or anything like that. Getting started is super easy. All you have to do is click on the link in the description of this video and fill out a questionnaire to help assess your specific needs, and in most cases, within 48 hours you'll be matched with your therapist. Over 4 million people have used BetterHelp to start living a healthier, happier life, and if you think you might benefit from some therapy, then click on the link in the description of this video, or go to www.betterhelp.com/Weshammer to get 10% off your first month. Big thanks to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video.
The Curse of Soloman. Deep within the heart of the Calexis sector is a blighted and heavily industrialized hive world that has been gripped by the cold hands of superstition and rebellion. The world of Soloman, as it is known, is one where secrets, hatred, and suspicion have been allowed to run rampant and unchecked in the shadowy places between the manufactorums. Every square inch of this world has been claimed in the name of production, and between the towering monolithic citadels of the hive metropolises is an area that spans thousands of square miles and is dominated by rusting pipelines, thunderous processing vats, and fire-belching pyro towers. This area is known to the locals simply as the Interior, and it is home to billions of workers. And most of them live pretty bleak and miserable lives, made all the worse by the constant fear of what the raving and the mad refer to as the Curse of Soloman. A great and terrible beast, a monstrous eldritch thing that lurks in every shadow and behind every corner. An entity of sentient terror that lurks on the edge of the terrified minds of the hive's population. The beast strikes without warning and with no discernible pattern, dragging away civilians kicking and screaming into the darkness, where they will be met with grisly and gruesome deaths, leaving nothing behind but bloody tatters to mark its passing. Whatever this entity is has terrorized the population for hundreds if not thousands of years, the stories passing from one generation to the next. The people here are so terrified of the beast that multiple different groups, be they religious cults or simply bands of terrified civilians concerned only with self-preservation, have turned to the horrific act of human sacrifice to keep the monster in the dark appeased. Mobs of terrified men and women turning against the cripple, the deformed, the elderly, and, at times, even children. Or, as is more often the case, an outsider that found themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. The victim will be bound and cast out into the darkness, while the rest of the community barricades themselves behind locked doors. With every sacrifice committed, the sound of horrified screams cut abruptly short, followed by the crunching of bones, is a sign that the rest of the population will live to see another morning. Many of you listening to this tale may find this behavior justifiably reprehensible. You may be wondering how anyone could ever sink so low as to cast out their own in this way. But to understand why these people turn to such horrific actions, it's important to understand just what a miserable existence their life is. Most of these people are laborers that work through the night by light of promethium lamps and drink water rich with pollutants that seep from the still stacks. To be born in the interior of Soloman is to begin one's life with a death sentence, be that a slow, poisonous death bestowed upon them by the higher-ups within the Imperium that profit off of their suffering, or by the sentient darkness that watches them with hungry curiosity. These people have no control over their lives, and with every new generation, mutation, cancer, and a shortened lifespan become far more commonplace. Making sacrifices to the beast gives them a sense of control over at least one of the greater forces that preys upon them. Those who dwell within the upper spires, and many members of the Inquisition included, dismiss these stories. They claim that there is no beast, that it was just an invention of the local population, a children's fable, a ghost story, a boogeyman, a figment of their imagination that they can blame all of their problems on. The scribes and hab-dwellers of the Administratum acknowledge just how terrible life is for those that live in the interior, and thus claim the logical conclusion is that the stories of the supposed Curse of Soloman are nothing more than the natural human response to the frailty of life. If there truly was some kind of deranged monster on the loose, it would be localized. Its stories wouldn't have spread through such a massive area and be recounted by millions, if not billions of people over such a long period of time, with no credible eyewitness reports to point to that aren't just delusional ramblings about monsters in the dark. From their haughty perspective, the Lowborns have simply invented a mythical beast to give themselves something tangible that explains the bleak hopelessness of their existence. And, more importantly, it gives them a misplaced and delusional hope that they can save themselves from their own existence through monstrous acts of barbarity. The scant few individuals that believe these tales have come up with many different theories for what the beast could actually be. Some have claimed that there may be a piece of ancient lost Xenos technology that is capable of causing widespread hallucinations buried deep within Soloman. Such a device could also potentially drive the afflicted individuals into a maddened and murderous state. There are others that claim that the interior is haunted by an unknown external force, some kind of inhuman sentience, possessing a malign sense of reason that is impossible to placate and too inhuman to comprehend. Some claim that there really is a beast of Soloman, some form of ancient creature, be it Xenos or an entity of the warp that predates human involvement on Soloman and is acting to preserve its secret existence. Even though the Inquisition has largely dismissed the beasts of Soloman, there are a few Inquisitors who take the stories very seriously. To them, even though they are a vocal minority, it just makes sense that in a galaxy full of strange, terrible, and esoteric entities, why is it so unbelievable that something lurks within the depths of Soloman and is preying upon its population? To them, there are just too many stories, too many individuals that claim to have been affected by it, that the legend simply can't be dismissed. The people living in the interior certainly believe it to be real, a crawling nightmare, the silent scythe of death that has gorged itself on rumor, fear, and superstition. A monstrous entity with as many forms as the people that believe in it. A savage and unknown alien predator, just as dangerous and terrifyingly real as any of the other monstrosities that dwell within the deepest depths of the void. The parasitic aliens known as vampires. The galaxy of the 41st millennium is home to legions of horrific and disturbing alien creatures that prey upon the flesh of men, the vast majority of them being entities that humans as a species would not encounter until their exploratory efforts brought them into contact with them, our migratory paths bringing us right through their feeding grounds. However, as strange as it sounds, some of these alien species have been known to mankind for far longer, some of their earliest mentions being recorded in ancient crumbling documents preserved by stasis field technology and believed to be more than 40,000 years old. In the days of old Earth, there were dozens, if not hundreds of different distinct cultures from different points in time all across the planet that spoke of a very similar monster. A creature of sentient shadow, a parasite that sustained its unnaturally long lifespan by feeding upon the blood of its victims. These entities were said to be supernaturally strong, fast, and in the strangest, most heretical texts that have been preserved from this time period, some ancient profane heretics even claimed that many of these monstrosities were actually kinda sexy. The lore of Warhammer 40K tells us that the iconic monsters known as vampires are 100% real, but those who lived in the ancient times couldn't possibly have known the full truth about what they actually were. You see, vampires are a parasitic, shape-shifting alien species that spread to every corner of the cosmos and would entrench itself within any alien societies that it happened to encounter. They can take on any form that they wish and have evolved to perfectly mimic just about everything about whatever species they choose to prey upon, and making them almost impossible to detect. However, their natural form is said to be that of a monstrous humanoid bat-shaped creature. One with large leathery wings, elongated fangs, and a lithe yet muscular body. Just about every documented vampire was also shown to possess significant psychic abilities, which were all perfectly honed to make them into a highly lethal apex predator. These powers also made them master manipulators and could make all that witnessed them see them as the most charismatic, suave, and desirable person imaginable. Although some records indicate that they could derive some nourishment from traditional food and drink, it was practically minuscule in comparison to what they gained by absorbing the life essence from their victims. Whether that be through prolonged physical contact, the drinking of the victim's vital fluids, or in some rare cases, a psychic aura that drained the spiritual essence of all of those in close proximity. If that wasn't bad enough, it was also said that any creatures the vampires fed upon would enter a permanent zombie-like state. They were fully under its control and would commit all forms of horrific and blasphemous acts at their master's command. After having spent some time amongst the population, vampires will often use a combination of their psychic gifts, shape-shifting ability, and extensive knowledge that they have gained about the wants and desires of a local population to leverage themselves into positions of power. A vampire who became elevated in such a way would have unlimited access to spread its vile influence and prey upon the world's population without fear of repercussion. It's interesting to note that in almost every documented report of a known vampire, they are almost always operating alone. Thus, it is believed that the species sees other members of its own kind as a threat to their influence and a rival to their feeding grounds. There was one account of a vampire rising to power on the hive world of Cephian IV. However, its heresy was eventually rooted out by the Black Templars. And fun fact, it was the future High Marshal of the Black Templars, Helbright, that managed to kill the creature, the act seeing him inducted into the ranks of the Sword Brethren. The Astral Hounds. All the way across time and space, from the solar system to the far reaches of the halo stars, species noted for having at least some psychic connection to the warp have reported sightings of large predatory entities that strike without warning and seem to materialize out of thin air. These entities take the form of deranged hounds, often depicted with glowing red eyes and a shadowy, smoky body that seems to flicker in and out of existence. Collectively referred to as the Astral Hounds, these monsters are believed to have originated in the warp, and although have been responsible for the grisly deaths of men and women from all walks of life, they seem to be particularly drawn to psychers. More so, psychers with latent potential, or ones that are early in their training and do not have full control over their abilities. These individuals give off a resonant scent that echoes across dimensions and is so intoxicating to the hounds that once they catch a whiff of the psycher's soul, they'll rip a hole between realities in order to stalk their most favored prey. Although there have been several reports of these creatures operating alone, it's far more common for them to hunt in packs of upwards of 6 distinct individuals. We really don't know a lot about the Astral Hounds, so take what I have to say here with a grain of salt, but it is likely that they're not actual demon dogs. The creatures born of the warp do not have a physical form. They are sentient energy. Thus, when they materialize in real space, their form is often reflective of their inherent nature. Thus, a slobbering, ferocious pack-hunting canid is a physical representation of the darkness within their malignant and feral souls. Fun fact, much like how humanity had spun tales of vampires long before we realized their true nature as parasitic aliens, so too have the Astral Hounds been depicted in the legends of old Earth. Tales of the Black Dogs, or Shadow Hounds, are believed to have originated in English folklore, and these hellhounds were usually believed to be directly associated with the devil, their sightings being seen as an omen for sinister events yet to unfold. Since the hounds are creatures of the warp and can materialize in any location they choose, they are absolute masters of ambush tactics. It's not uncommon for a victim to momentarily let their guard down, only to suddenly find the jaws of 6 distinct predators wrapped around different parts of their body. What's really interesting to note about these creatures is that they don't seem to have any psychic ability of their own. Instead, they're able to create some form of link between their astral bodies in the realm of the immaterium and the physical mind of the psyker that they are hunting. By creating this link, they're able to siphon off the victim's own psychic ability to generate a tangible body. Now, giant ghost dogs tracking your scent across dimensions is siphoning off your powerful abilities that you have to defend yourself, ambushing you from the shadows when you're at your weakest, and then ripping you apart in a visceral spectacle of carnage and gore is certainly bad enough. But even more horrifying than that is the fact that there are multiple reports from individuals who have witnessed Astral Hound attacks that say it's also quite common for the hounds to only subdue their prey. Not only are their jaws ridiculously strong, but their bite is also said to have a paralyzing effect. To be subdued by the hounds in such a way is to meet a far more terrifying end, as the creatures will drag their victims kicking and screaming into the warp. Nobody knows exactly what happens to these individuals after the fact. To their friends and family, they simply disappeared without a trace. But considering the fact that the warp is anathema to human life and the realm of demons, thirsting gods, and horrors beyond our comprehension, it is a likely scenario that having been simply ripped apart would have been a more preferable way to go. The Skin Taker of Fedrid. Deep within the Calexis sector is the backwater death world of Fedrid, a planet dominated by thick, steaming jungles and a feral population of humans often raised to be recruited into regiments within the Imperial Guard. The seemingly impenetrable jungles of this world are exceedingly dangerous and said to house a wide array of exotic and deadly beasts, making it a hotspot for poachers and large game hunters that have come to seek fortune and glory by setting off on various expeditions to hunt its native wildlife. Some of these individuals are nothing more than eccentric billionaires looking for a thrill, while more commonly, those who would make the journey here are poachers seeking to capture many of these insidious creatures for profit to sell to the many arenas found throughout the Imperium. In recent times, in an effort to choke the illegal trade of Xenos, the Adeptus Arbites have been deployed in force to patrol Fedrid and its surrounding system. Despite the dangers and the potential for getting on the bad side of the Adeptus Arbites, Fedrid continues to lure many hunters into its jungles. This is a place where just about everything will try to kill you, from horrifically poisonous insects, man-eater plants the size of a school bus, tons of parasites that will burrow into their victim's flesh and rot their body from the inside out, and here, even the herbivores are said to be ludicrously aggressive and will attack at the slightest provocation. Of all of the monsters within the jungles of Fedrid, of which there are a great many, none command as much fear as the one the locals refer to as the Skin Taker. On numerous occasions throughout the jungles, hunting parties have stumbled across the flayed remains of men, strung up from the trees or upon simple lashed-together frames, a grisly warning to all those that would enter into its feeding grounds. All in all, whatever this creature may be, it is responsible for hundreds of disappearances, and whatever means it utilizes to hunt and dispatch its victims are so effective that to this day, we only have a few eyewitness accounts to go off of. The survivors describe seeing nothing more than a slight blur, a shimmering mirage that darts from tree to tree, and nothing more than a ripple in the air with no discernible form. On the other hand, there are reports that describe the Skin Taker as something like a hole in reality, a moving sentient spot of visual distortion. All of the witnesses describe a scene of utter terror where one by one their party was picked off. The thing whittled them down till only the strongest, most skillful, or perhaps luckiest hunter was left alive. The only thing that it left behind were flayed bodies, normally missing their heads. Based on these eyewitness accounts, the Inquisition has come up with several theories on what the Skin Taker could possibly be. On one hand, a known predatory species on Fedrid is a creature known as a mantid, which, picture in your mind a giant six-armed praying mantis that stands about 7 feet tall, and that's exactly what these things are. They're incredibly dangerous and exceptionally skilled in the camouflage department, but they're not able to literally disappear into their surroundings like the Skin Taker is described as being able to do. Not to mention the fact that the Skin Taker only seems to be interested in the victim's flayed skin, leaving the meat behind to rot in the jungle mud, a pattern of behavior that makes mantids an unlikely culprit. On the other hand, cloaking technology like this is not uncommon within some of the more prominent xenospecies like the Eldari that can be found throughout the galaxy. It's true that the grisly nature of these kills and the creature's propensity to leave behind flayed remains for others to find, it does line up with some of the more deranged practices of the Dark Eldar, a species that's defined as much by its brutality as its narcissism. And because of this, the idea that it would leave behind the remains without making its presence known doesn't exactly line up with the Drukhari. There are even some within the Inquisition that believe that the Skin Taker is some form of warp-born demon that is able to slip between realities without the aid of a summoner. From the Inquisition's perspective, the Skin Taker is obviously a threat to the Imperium's operations on Fedrid, but for the most part, it seems content to be fixated on hunting and slaughtering illegal poachers. So, to put it mildly, dealing with it hasn't exactly been a priority for them. However, the Skin Taker's actions have given rise to several different cults amongst the feral populations. These deranged cultists turning to prey upon their fellow men by pursuing, killing, and skinning any that travel out into the wilds in an attempt to emulate and perhaps appease the Skin Taker. So far, these cults seem to be mostly small and operate in the shadows, but the fact that they exist at all means that the Skin Taker's reign of terror may just be a precursor to something far worse. And those were 4 of Warhammer 40K's most creepy cryptids. Which one was your favorite and why? For me personally, I love stuff like the Curse of Soloman or the Skin Taker where we don't actually get a real good depiction of what the monster is. I always find that makes it much creepier. But at the same time, I love when fantasy franchises like 40K incorporate real-world legends like the one about vampires or Astral Hounds into their lore. I just think there's something so super neat about that. What are some other creepy cryptid-like monsters that you know of from 40K that you'd love to hear me talk about? As you know, the obscure, creepy stuff like this is always my favorite thing to research and talk about, and thus whenever I get a chance to make a video on this kind of stuff, I jump at the opportunity. I kind of want to make this an ongoing series, so if you have any leads on other creepy mysteries or cryptids or spooky monsters or anything like that, let me know all about it in the comment section down below. Anyways, that's all I had to say about creepy cryptids. Big thanks to everyone who supports the work that I do, and I will catch you all in the next one.